Hello, and welcome to One Voice Live, where we talk about One Voice, what it is, and how it fits into the world of singing. I am your host, Alex Zeto, and I'm joined today by creator of One Voice, Michael Maresca. Hello, Michael.
Hello, hello.
And this is our last show of our Changing Our Vocal Perspective series, which is where we talk about how One Voice is changing what we think we know to be true about singing. The topic for today is simply, what is One Voice? So, Michael, what are all the different parts that come together to create One Voice?
One voice, a lot of people hear that, they're immediately like, oh yeah, no, my teacher says that. My teacher talks about that. And I'm always like, you literally have no idea. And people are like, I love the idea of just one voice. Like we're not breaking it up anymore. And I'm like, no, you have no, I know you think you know what I'm talking about, but you have no idea. It's one of my favorite questions because I think it's one of the ones that most people who are one voicers out there really struggle to tell people what is One Voice, because they come back after master class or after summer intensive where we've been teaching and they're like, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. And they tell everyone how unbelievable this is and how much it's going to change the world and their lives. It's going to take over the world and blah, blah, blah. And One Voice is so amazing. And then people say this, they say, so, and I'm sure many of you have experienced this. They say, oh, that sounds so cool. So what is, so tell me about it. Like, what is One Voice? And then you're like, well, there's coordinations, weight, and then you put it together and there's vocal intensity, and then the people's faces start melting and like, that's nice. And they don't understand what you're saying anymore. I'm sure y'all can give me a shout out if that's been your experience or you had that experience with One Voice trying to explain it to people. It can be really tough. And I started to figure out why that was so difficult. And I want to explain that now and split it up for you all so you understand a little bit better as to why One Voice is so often difficult to explain to people. One of the things is One Voice started to grow and snowball, and I started learning more and more and more. I started to realize is that One Voice, because people kept saying this, they kept saying, oh yeah, your technique, oh, One Voice technique. And I was like, no, like it's not just a way of doing something. It redefines what we're doing. Like, I couldn't quite crack that. And so what I ultimately discovered is that One Voice is really made up of three parts. The first is the One Voice theories. The second is the techniques that we've developed based on those theories to help the voice move to where we need it to quicker, more efficient, more effectively, etc. And then finally, it's the training, which is our methods and methodology behind how to disseminate that information and get people to where they want to go in terms of their vocal goals, etc. Once I understood that and realized that there was really three parts to it, it suddenly became so much more clear as to what I was looking at. When people are really trying to explain the game changer that One Voice is, what they're really talking about is the theories. The theories are the thing that quite literally change the foundation for which we engage with singing. At a foundational level, it all changes because of those theories. And it's funny because people are like, so like, tell me, like, what are the differences? I'm always like, woo! It's major. It's a huge difference. You're changing the entire foundation for which we define the human voice, which has always been on resonance in terms of training. But now we're talking about it from a completely different angle because of the coordinations theory. And then weight theory talks about how we actually accomplish the things we want to be able to accomplish. And so the theories are really the foundational shift, the huge change, which is why we all get so excited because the coordinations theory offers us a whole new way of looking at the voice and possibilities for the human voice. And so when everyone gets so excited, that's the thing that they're talking about. The techniques, let me talk about that now, second. The techniques started being created. I started to realize what was happening with my life as a teacher and the theories. I started to realize this changes everything. So this exercise that I used to do with people, I don't really understand what efficacy it has in building a voice and trying to achieve what I'm trying to achieve with a voice. So what does this mean? And so I would sit there and I would say, so if this is true and I want to get the voice to do this, what are ways that I can do it? And it was literally trial and error to get my voice to do certain things. And then as I was working with my clients to try and get their voices to do things. And so even now today, as you know, Alex, we are building and creating new techniques and tools to help people continue to be more efficient with how they accomplish things with their voices. And for us as coaches, how much more quickly we can help someone or aid someone in achieving their goals vocally, because we're getting clearer about how we can make something happen that much faster and more effectively. So the techniques are really exciting. And We can even take old techniques and tools and exercises that have been used long in the past and recycle them in a way that allows us to be more effective with them, instead of the idea where you might have one exercise that worked for most of the females you're working with. I'm going to try it with this female and assume that it will work and hope that it will. And if it doesn't, then it was probably that female's fault for not understanding what I was offering them. And none of that really makes sense to me, and nor does it feel fair as a teacher. I think it's our responsibility, right, to be able to get that information in. And so this then takes us to the third part, which is the training. And for me, something that was really important is that I realized that in order to get the ideas out, we had to be able to disseminate that information in a way that was successful and helpful and beneficial, not only to the student or the client, but also to us as coaches, as the teachers, so that we had space and room to continue to grow. And so the training in and of itself is its own methodology and way of training. And as you know, as part of certification, One Voice Coach certification, we go through that training of learning how to teach, how we build discovery-based learning, all these alternative learning methods that we've woven together to come up with our own unique way of teaching how to sing and make sound, ultimately. And so those are the three parts. If I were to sum it up into one little sentence, I would say, what is One Voice? One Voice is a whole new way of looking at the human voice. One Voice is a whole new way at looking at the human voice. And I think that about sums it up in a nutshell, because it is. And that's why it's so overwhelming when people try to describe it to people, because there's so many facets to it that I never intended for, never dreamed would happen, and now has snowballed into this massive thing where there's three big parts that all in of themselves live on their own. The training is its own thing. The techniques are their own thing. The theories are their own thing. I can spend days talking about the techniques and working with people. I can spend days talking about the teaching. I can spend days talking about the theories, as many of you know who are watching this, One Voices out there. So yes, that is what I would say in terms of the different parts and breaking One Voice down so people understand it. It's an umbrella. It's a much bigger picture than just one little idea.
I feel like people are most familiar, our One Voice community is most familiar with the theories and the techniques. Will you talk a little bit more about training and why you have made training the way it is? How does it help us as singers?
Love that question. I am a constant curiosity person. I'm very interested, and I learn a lot of things because I'm curious about a lot of stuff. I love watching shows like How It Works. One of my favorite shows when I was a kid, or channels when I was a kid, was the Discovery Channel. I would watch things all the time. I loved it. I thought it was so fascinating. I was a good student, but one of the things I struggled with in some classes was my inability to understand certain concepts. And I would later on run into teachers who were very different at how they approached teaching. And I learned differently with them. And I was able to grasp information that I couldn't grasp with previous teachers. English was one of them. English was really hard for me. I was a really slow reader because I didn't learn how to read fast. And so I always did really poorly in my English classes. I remember those comprehension tests where you would read fast and then you'd have to, do something right after. And it would obliterate me. I would almost always fail those, which was the worst. And then I would get these terrible grades in class because I was what I would call a cinematic reader. I would read and I would see everything happening while I'm reading it. But it takes me like 3 minutes to get through one page, right? But the problem is you only have a minute and a half to read 7 pages, right? And here I am like on page 1. And
fully exploring all of the characters.
Yeah, fully just living in the moment. Yeah, and they're like, and time, close your books. That is the worst. And so that was my experience with that. And I started to realize, maybe this doesn't work. Maybe I'm a bad reader. Maybe I am bad at English. Maybe I am not smart at this. What I started to re-examine with that in the world of One Voice was that there was many different ways that we could actually learn. And one of the most deep-rooted, beneficial ways for most people to learn that we found is many people learn well through discovery-based learning, meaning we help you or guide you to learning the information rather than telling you all the stuff. It's kind of like standing over someone and telling them all the things to cook for a meal. The problem is when you tell them all the things that they need to use for the ingredients to cook their cake or bake their cake, they don't really ever learn for themselves what the process is. They're just reading a list, basically. You happen to be the list. So what's the difference between having a teacher versus just having a piece of paper? Why not just have a piece of paper? That's far more effective and efficient. I can print millions of those and pass those out. I can't print a million teachers. What I started to realize through this methodology and this way of thinking with training or teaching is that what we can do is we can help people or guide people to understanding a process and a way of thinking. I think way of thinking is a really unique attribute of one voice training, is that we help people think. And a lot of people get really frustrated initially. And if you've been in a one voice masterclass before, had the privilege of sitting in on one, you'll find that if you are that person, you feel frustrated, not by the content, simply because what is challenging you is you're being asked to think and learn. And that can be really hard when we live in a system and a society, particularly with our educational system right now, where we're given lists and we learn lists and we're supposed to just regurgitate what's on the book. This is true both in secondary school and in college, higher education, etc. We learn lists and then we regurgitate them on other lists, and hopefully we get those lists right and we match them up. But where's the real learning there? And so for me, this is something that was highly interesting for me, was understanding how we could learn better, how we could learn this information in particular better, how we could incorporate it for other people who are stuck. So many people in the world of singing are stuck with mentalities and ways of thinking. In fact, just yesterday I was speaking with someone about a person who had gone to Juilliard, and they were super frustrated about their entire experience because they felt like, I just didn't really gain anything. And what had happened is they felt stuck because they could never get out of being a baritone, right? And we've already talked about this, at length, the show 1 and 2 in the beginning. So what that tells me is that he didn't have any opportunity to have discovery-based learning. So he's just stuck where he is vocally, and he quite literally can't see a way out of it. And what's an amazing thing to watch is that through one voice training, what you start to see, quite literally the training alone, forget about the technical side of it, forget about the theories, forget about that for a second, just look at the training for a minute. Alone, what it does to people is by the time they've had several sessions, what happens in their brains is their brains approach the session as someone who's coming in to think with a peer. And so when we train people, when we work with people, it's not about us just making them better and saying, I will now make you better. You have to do nothing. I will tell you all the things. It's about a relationship, a peer relationship of working together at the same level, where the student comes in and says, all right, cool, so here's what I was thinking. I was working and I had this heavy weight here and I'm going light. I know I'm going light and I keep jumping back and forth. And now it's a collaboration versus this teacher and student relationship where the teacher has all the power. One of our main objectives with our clients that we work with is to make them self-sufficient. That's the ultimate goal. It's the same thing I've taken into my world at Texas State, is with them is building them to become self-sufficient singers so they can take care of themselves. And that's the ultimate goal, right? Like I don't believe that you need to be training with someone for the rest of your life. Yeah, sure, doing check-ins and checking in to get different perspectives and points of view, sure. Refreshing, absolutely. That's like going to your doctor's checkup once a year. But do you need to have ongoing training for the rest of your life in that skill set? I hope not. And that means you're not at a proficient, for me, that you're not at a proficient enough level that you can take care of yourself. And my hope would be that you could take care of yourself at some point. And so that's why we fight for our people to think. We fight for them to learn, to discover, and to be curious about their voices. So that, for me, the training aspect is vital to the success of someone's singing career and health, I would say, ultimately as a singer, if you want to keep growing.
Yeah, one of my most frustrating things as a singer before One Voice was I would do everything right in the voice lesson and I would go home, and without my voice teacher there, I would have no idea what I was doing. And
Absolutely.
I would not make progress unless they were standing there telling me exactly what to do. And I think it's the best thing we can offer our students is them understanding enough that when we're not there, they are making just as much progress, just as many discoveries as when we are there. And you talking about a collaboration, my favorite thing is when I've been working with someone long enough where I'm like, okay, hey, let's try this. And they're like, okay, great. I need to check in with this one thing first. And they go rogue. And I'm like, yes, do it. Check in with what you got to check in with. You know what you're doing. You know what the goal is. It's such a collaboration. And it's so exciting to see that.
And you remind me of an analogy I use for this is thinking about it like a wilderness survival school. Our goal is to prepare you for the wilderness, and so that you know how to make fire, you know how to make pine needle tea. You get out there, and that's the test, is getting out and performing and doing that thing, and then being in the audition or after the audition or the gig or the recording session and saying, my voice didn't do what I wanted to do. I wonder why that was. Oh my gosh, I was shifting weights. Oh no, my vibrato came in. Oh, I was imbalanced. I'm going to add that to my next prep to make sure in my next workout I revisit that. What? That's total self-sufficiency. It's amazing. Instead of saying, oh no, that didn't go that didn't go very well. What does well mean, and why wasn't it well? Why wasn't it good? And establishing all of those things, so cool. So yeah, thinking of it that way. And then every now and then you come back to the cabin and to figure out some new things, or hey, is everything looking good in my gear? Is my gear, my backpack look good? Yeah, it looks good. Go back out to the wilderness. Keep going.
Yeah, you talking about that just makes me think about the problem of consistency, which I feel like so many singers are struggling with. And of course they are, because how can you be consistent when you don't know what you're doing?
Yeah, what you're aiming for. You don't know. Yeah, absolutely.
Those people who go to a One Voice masterclass or who hear a bit about One Voice and they say, oh yeah, that's what my teacher talks about. That's what my teacher's teaching me. What do you think it is that they might be missing?
When they say that, I think one of the first things their brain hears is they hear the words one voice. And a common idea is teachers trying to break down mentally some potential mental blocks that their students may be having about, like, oh, but I'm now in my, I'll say conventional terms, I'm in my chest voice right now, I'm in my head voice. And I just can't do my chest voice up there. And the teacher's like, no, just sing. And if they can get them to just sing, then their voices will free up and they'll suddenly be able to hit the high notes. And that's actually true for some people. Wouldn't it be great, everyone, if you could just start singing higher and you'll sing higher and be better at it? Yes, that would be great, wouldn't it? But that's not the experience for most of us. Most of us aren't that lucky. And so I think with that in mind, a lot of people in the teaching seat think if I can just get their heads out of the way, then they'll just go for it and they'll just sing it. But the problem is those people try and go for it and they crash and burn. Not because they can't do it, but simply because if we look at it through the lens of the coordinations theory, we start to recognize is that they're just not moving into the next coordination, whereas the other person was, which is why they could just sing higher and they got out of their own way, right? And so I think that's where the idea of releasing the boundaries of the voice come from and all this stuff, which is lovely in mind, but I think, again, coming back to being clear about why we're using that and what the aim of that is with someone, I think that's important to note. And I'll also say, that's the one voice idea where people kind of get lost on or hung up on the idea of one voice and be like, oh, my teacher talks about it. I'm like, no, they don't. I promise you they don't. If they did, I would know who they were. But I think the other thing is that we have a lot of teachers in the world, and you may be listening to this right now, and you may be one of them, a lot of voice teachers in the world who have been gnawing, chomping at the bit, knowing that there's something that they're trying to articulate, something that is there that they hear or that they know that doesn't quite work with their vocabulary. That's because they're stuck in a language. They're limited by the language that they have in the conventional world of singing training or voice training. They're struggling hardcore to try and navigate how to explain something that they don't have words for, but they just feel frustrated and stuck. And so people have found some creative ways of trying to explain the things that we've now defined in the one voice theories using conventional language, which is very convoluted and confusing and doesn't actually make sense. When you hear someone say it, it really doesn't make any sense. And you all know what I'm talking about. And this is where you start getting the snaps where people are like, yes, 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 that, oh my gosh, I've been thinking this forever. Now there's a language to it. Now there's a whole theory set that describes what's occurring. It all makes so much sense now. And this is what we hear time and time again when we walk away from a class is people like, oh my gosh, it makes sense. And it's one of the greatest compliments, which for me is a part of that whole symbiotic relationship of all three things, of the theories, of the techniques, of the training, is when someone walks away and they say, oh my gosh, it all finally makes sense. Singing makes sense to me. What? That's amazing to say. So yeah, I think that's what happens for most people, is that they walk away from that moment either confusing what we're saying with something else, of saying, oh, one voice, and they just take the word one voice and they try and immediately apply it to their world, not knowing that what they're hearing is not something they actually know, or that it is something that they know intrinsically, internally. They've been trying to describe the sensation that they feel in their body, but they haven't had a language for it yet. And one voice gives them that language and that freedom.
So theories, techniques, training, and our way of thinking. Is there anything else that we're missing that plays in the part of making what one voice is?
Yes, probably the most important part of one voice. You know, one voice started off as a obsession for me. It started off as this obsession to understand the voice and understand why I couldn't do the things I wanted to do with my voice, and how come some people could do things and others couldn't, and how come some people could suddenly do things that others couldn't. And it was all very convoluted, and it was all very magical and mysterious to me. And One Voice began as this obsession for me to understand better. What happened was something I just never could have imagined, was that it turned into what it turned into. It snowballed into One Voice, which is this huge thing now, and has become, it's like this tiny little movement in the world of singing. And what makes up a movement? It's people, and it's a community, and it's everyone who's watching this right now, everyone who shares this. And I consider these people One Voicers. They're the people who press curiosity. They're the people who are hungry to learn more. That they believe that maybe there's something just beyond the wall. If we could just get over that wall, there might be more. These are what I would consider One Voicers. And they're the people who are taking the ideas and sharing them. And they're going home to their families and to their friends and their directors and teachers. And they're saying, oh my gosh, this stuff, I've never heard. This is unbelievable. Those are the One Voicers. And I think that's what makes this movement possible. People say this all the time. They're saying One Voice is going to take over the world. Can't wait for One Voice to take over the world. Can't wait for this to show up in auditions and breakdowns and all that stuff. And me too, because I think it will make our lives as singers far more clear and demystified and easy. So that would be the other, I'll say, hidden component, which really it's the thing that fuels everything, which is our community of One Voicers like you guys. And thank you. And you and I are One Voicers, you know, and I think that's really cool. And I'll also say this too. One Voicers aren't just people who do private training with certified One Voice coaches. One Voicers, we've got One Voicers out there who have never had private training at all. And they are hungry, and they are watching these, and they are submitting questions and doing stuff like that all the time. And I think that's amazing. And I can't tell you all how much I appreciate you enough, how grateful I am to you all for continuing to trust and support this movement of curiosity. So thank you for that. Really, really cool.
Yes, I'm seeing like a Newsy like montage, but like for One Voice. That's amazing. Yeah.
I think that wraps it for me. And I do want to say I love questions, as does Alex, and I love hearing them on the show. Gosh, we'd love to hear from you guys, whatever thoughts you have, comments, questions, etc. at questions.singonevoice.com. Love to hear more.
I'm going to read the question, and then I'll play the audio clip.
And James, where is James from? Do we know where James is from?
I don't know where James is from. Yeah, James, let us know where you're from. Oh, I think there are two main questions that are happening here, or two main ideas, I should say, which is, first of all, being identified as a bass because of a vocal track shaping and weight choice. And then the second one is, how do we sound more pop? So I'm going to play the clip, and then we'll look at those.
Love, so many things I gotta tell you, but I'm afraid I don't know how.
Great. So I'm going to stop there. I think we get a good idea. So Michael, I'd love to hear your thoughts, starting with the idea of being labeled as a bass. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, James, I think you nailed it on the head. You probably tend to be labeled as a bass, particularly when you sing, because you are singing with a larger vocal tract. Vocal tract is simply the space from above your vocal cords all the way to the tip of your mouth and some other areas in the back. Depending on how you shape that, what we would call large or small, it can really affect how you sound. So if I normally spoke like this, you would probably think that I was some form of a bass or baritone or something like that. If I sing like this, the same thing's going to be true. If I'm going to sing, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound, versus having a more what we would call neutral vocal tract, or even a small vocal tract, which you'll sound a lot younger. A small vocal tract, something like that, just like I'm talking now. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. Or Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. They all sound very different. All of that is attributed to the shape. Now, most of the time, people will call us or label us something because we can't sing high. That's why they'll call us a bass or a baritone, or because we can sing low. Obviously, we're bass. But what do they do with us when we can also belt a tenor high C, right? Now what are you? Well, you're a bass a tenor, right? And that's what you start getting stupid things like that because we don't have a language for that, right? In One Voice, you're just a voice. You're just a singer that has access to a developed rumble, developed chest, developed middle, developed head coordination, etc. You have heavy weight in 2 or 3 of those or whatever. But that's where I put it in terms of being classified as a bass. People in speech, if you speak like this, most of the time they're going to say, oh, wow, he's got such a deep voice. Yeah, he's probably a bass. right? It's not even about speaking low in terms of pitch. It's mostly about just the shape. Question part 2.
Is there a way to make my voice sound more pop?
Stylistically, I'll throw out a couple things. I think being more pop in terms of a style. It's funny, pop actually has quite a range of sound in terms of the artists. But I will offer you one thing that is very clear, and that is contrast. There's a tremendous level of contrast in pop. You'll hear it all the time. And by contrast, what I mean is weight changes, volume changes that are abrupt, fast. It's a Charlie Puth song, We Don't Talk Anymore. It's with Selena Gomez on it. We don't talk anymore. Ooh, we don't talk anymore. And it's very light. It goes, like we used to do. And then the second later goes, I just wanna. Just right there, loud, heavyweight. And he goes from a lightweight, quiet, very light. And it's quick and it's clean. And so that's one thing or rule that I would add to your world of pop is clean contrast. The other thing that I would add, number 2, would be clarity of pulse. Very rhythmic feeling. Everything is very on the beat. Like you've got to feel that rhythm. And if you're sloppy with the rhythm, flexible with the rhythm, then we're not going to feel that beat or pulse. And that's another big part that people miss musically in pop world versus like something with country, old school country or jazz or some of those things. People have a little more flex. In pop, the beat and the pulse and being right on it is so crucial. Lastly, I'll just add partially playing with vocal track. You can, but I don't think it's essential in pop.
Yeah, I totally agree. You can, oh my gosh. I mean, Lake Street Dive is a pop singer. And if y'all know who she is, she's long vocal track, super jazzy, and is a really successful singer of a band. So I think you can find all kinds of vocal track shapings, all kinds of weights in pop. It's just about the sound you're going for. One thing I will recommend is a few months ago, I did 2 videos, one on, I think it was soul pop, like Adele, which gives you a few options of things to play with, as well as a video on vibrato. And I think the vibrato will also play a huge part for you, James, specifically in sounding a bit more pop, playing with the speed and where you place it. Maybe playing with straight tone more, adding it more to the ends of phrases. I think that's a really great place to start, as well as listening to singers who you want to emulate. I mean, you have the vocab, which is awesome. So say, oh, what way are they singing in? Where are they placing their vibrato? And start to become a little bit of a detective and playing with that in your own voice.
Love that. Yeah. Thanks for that question, James. That was fantastic.
Yeah, James, thank you so much. What a cool combo you let us to have. So please, everybody, submit questions and audio clips to questions.singonevoice.com. And I will also add that those of you who are loving this and you want more, maybe you want to take private sessions, we do offer 30-minute free consultations with a One Voice coach to talk about your vocal goals and to see if private sessions are something that you would like. And you can sign up for those at singonevoice.com and follow the links for private training. Next week, we're starting a new series called Singer Study, which this is a little bit of what I was talking about with James, is we're going to start listening to our favorite singers and exploring the choices that they're making and break it down. I'll be joined by Jackson Perrin. And we actually have a new time next week. Starting next week, we're going to be meeting Wednesday evenings at 6:30 p.m. CT, 7:30 p.m. ET. So we will see you guys there. Thank you, Michael, so much. And I will see the rest of you next week.
Yeah.
Bye.